We'd like to welcome everybody to another webinar. This one, as you can see from the title, is entitled, What's the Catch? An Examination of the Anti-Phishing Solutions Landscape. This is part of what Zimperium loves to do is, especially as the folks that our whole thing is we secure mobile. We secure mobile devices and we secure mobile apps. This obviously conversation about the mobile device part. One of the main things as the mobile security landscape and related adjacencies are continuing to evolve, we like to bring educational things to folks to bring value in the session. So we're going to get kicked off, but first I'd like to make a couple quick introductions. I'm going to be moderating this session, so you won't have to listen to me talk, which is great for everybody here. First, I would like to welcome Paul Stringfellow, a lead analyst at GigaOm, and the author of the Anti-Phishing Radar report that we're going to be diving into here in a second. So Paul, thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you, JT. Thanks for having me here. Really looking forward to this conversation today. I think it's a fascinating area, one that's evolved a lot since we last did some research in this space a couple of years ago. So keen to share some of our findings with you. Hopefully, it'll be educational for all those tuning in this afternoon.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'm really interested in that conversation about how it has evolved, because as you mentioned, the GigaOm did a radar on this a couple of years ago. It's evolved, and that's going to be a great part of the talk because, frankly, the anti-phishing market has evolved. And then joining Paul and I is Monique, and Monique Vicente is our product manager and product marketing lead for all things on the endpoint security side. So, Monique, thank you for joining us as well. Yep, you're on mute, Monique. Are you still there? Yep, we can't hear you, so we might need to work on that in a minute. So while Monique figures out her technical difficulties, some quick housekeeping. You guys all know the drill. This is the standard stuff that everybody does. We're going to be running through this. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A section. There we go. I think we have Monique back. Monique,
are you able to hear me now, everyone?
Yep, you're back. There we go.
All right, perfect. Thanks for having me this morning. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thanks for being here and sharing your voice with us. So bonus points across the board. Folks, again, use the Q&A part of the platform. As I'm moderating, if I see a question that I think will actually make sense in the context of where we are, then we'll hop on that. And otherwise, we'll save them for the end. And those questions that we don't actually get a chance to get to now, we'll make sure that we take care of and get your response back to you after that. And naturally, because we're on the Bright Talk platform, this will be available for replays and for sharing with your friends and things along those lines. So let's start diving in. And first, I guess I should have shown that. First, let's this is the agenda. This is what we're going to run through. We're going to talk about changes in the anti-phishing landscape, both vendors as well as the landscape itself. We're going to specifically talk a little bit about mobile phishing, because obviously we're a mobile phishing company or a mobile company. So that makes sense for you folks listening to this, probably have some interest in that. Then Paul's going to go into how the vendors were evaluated in their comprehensive anti-phishing solution, the report. And then Monique will come back with some best practices as we go from there. So first, let's just kind of frame this up. Paul, can you kind of give us a view of how you see things have changed in the overall phishing landscape?
Yeah, JT, certainly can. And as you've touched on, and I mentioned in my introduction, we last looked at this part of the enterprise technology sector back in 2020. And 2020, I think for many of us was a year where an awful lot changed. And those changes have really changed the way that many organizations operate, in way they operate internally, in the way they operate with their partners, in the way they operate with their customers, and suppliers. And that kind of changing landscape has really altered our view of the anti-phishing market. We very much looked at anti-phishing back in 2020 as something that you did at the perimeter and something that was primarily focused around email. And I think that the world has shifted an awful lot. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic, you know, it's definitely still a thing. I think that we need to not be afraid to talk about. You know, really has changed the way fundamentally that organizations begin to operate. You know, if we look at the way we operate today, or customers, partners, even the way that we're doing this event, you know, probably pre-2020, lots of organizations such as yours, such as, you know, the ones I work with, those organizations would still very much have liked to have got people in a room to share this kind of information. But, you know, but we've changed hugely. You know, today in our organizations, we're much more distributed than we perhaps ever imagined, even back in 2020 when we first looked at this kind of landscape and this part of the technology market. You know, our workforces are much more distributed, and that means that they're using more devices. More of those users are mobile. They want more flexible access to information, to our applications, to our data, and they want that all of the time. We've also seen that because of that distribution of our workforce, we've also seen a change in the kind of tools that we're using in the enterprise. Increasingly, we're using collaboration tools. So if we think about things like Teams, we think about Google Workspace and how we use those kind of things. You know, those tools have changed the way that we share information, not just internally, but the way we share information externally, as I mentioned before, with customers, partners, and suppliers. It's also changed the way that we communicate. You know, we saw a hugely rapid adoption of things like Zoom, things like Teams. You know, we saw Slack become increasingly kind of, you know, visible inside of the enterprise. You know, if you think pre-2020, the only people who knew what Zoom was people who worked in the enterprise, who probably worked in our industry. Today, your mom and your grandmother know what Zoom is and use it on a regular basis to host parties and quizzes. So, you know, the way that we utilize technology has changed incredibly. And one of the other things that we saw was this real rapid acceleration of shifting to cloud, you know, and not just the idea that we started to move platform and infrastructure into cloud. You know, we were moving applications, we were taking advantage of, and still are, taking advantage of software as a service increasingly. You know, and we probably all have examples that we saw in the early parts of 2020 where organizations rapidly rolled out a Zoom or rapidly rolled out Teams, not because they wanted to rapidly adopt that piece of technology, but because they needed that technology to ensure that they could continue to operate as a business. And so all of those changes that happened back in 2020, you know, very few of those changes are now going away, because what we've seen as organizations, and I think even for those, if you're watching this and you work for an organization where you've pretty much returned to kind of normal operations, you know, maybe most of you are back in the office, the way that we communicate and collaborate across enterprise, across customers, across partners has changed, and has changed fundamentally, and will, you know, and has changed for the long term. And what does that mean when we talk about phishing? Well, what that means when we talk about phishing is the security threat has changed as well. You know, phishing continues to be very much one of the top security threats that we see in an organization. Phishing continues to rise. Users are still getting caught out. You know, they are still clicking on links. They're still visiting websites and sharing information. You know, users continue to be fooled by increasingly smart and intelligent phishing attacks, sometimes targeted, sometimes very broad brush. But what we've also seen, because of this changing landscape, that the phishing threat has also changed, and changed fundamentally, and changed for the long term. You know, today we don't see phishing primarily focused just on email and just on the perimeter. You know, what we're really seeing is that the bad actors, that those who want to use phishing as a way of attacking our organization, are doing that across any platform where we share information, where we look to collaborate, where we may think that we're interacting. Even, you know, we've even seen examples where phishing attacks have been targeted at service desk chat applications. So you think you're chatting to a service desk representative, you're actually being phished by a bad actor. So, you know, the landscape has changed hugely, and what the landscape of the enterprise landscape changing has driven is a big change in the way that bad actors, cyber criminals, are using phishing to target those organizations. You know, JT, Monique, you know, are these things that are in line with kind of what you guys are seeing as well, or is that just me?
Monique?
No, I definitely do see phishing evolve. You know, it's more prominent on mobile devices now, and with mobile devices, you know, the technology, the screen's so small, sometimes it's hard to see, you know, this long URL where these, you know, where you would typically on an your email application on your laptop, you'd be able to see who the address is, who it's coming from. But I think on mobile devices, it's much easier to be phished because they're getting more advanced, a lot more crafty in their, not only their messages, but how they're using this with, SMS phishing we're seeing definitely on the rise, but it's definitely evolved quite a bit. What about you, JT?
Yeah, no, I agree with both what you guys talked about. Quickly on the phishing thing, I mean, we did, and Paul, we talked about this, you can't say this 5 times fast, especially after having a cocktail, our global mobile threat report, which is a mouthful, 75% of the phishing sites now are optimized for mobile. And this is, again, a result of this shift that we're talking about. And I think the other thing, kind of, Paul, I come back to this landscape you're talking about here, to overstate or to maybe oversimplify it, we went from this world where we were on corporate managed laptops and desktops within our perimeter that were protected. All the communication that was coming in was email based. Now you go out and you're operating from, as you were talking about, any device, and it's outside of the perimeter. And there's all these other things, particularly on mobile, to Monique's point, SMS, messenger stuff. Now it's like this, it's gone exponential. And as we know, the bad guys they're bad dudes, but they're very good at what they do. And they're looking for the weakest link. And so if they're saying, okay, I've got these mobile devices and they're out there, and to Monique's point, it's, the URL is not obvious. People are used to just clicking on things pretty quickly. And there's there's vectors that are outside of traditional, it all fits together. So yes. So Paul, how does, in light of that, and this we'll start to get to as we talk about your changing scope of the report, how has that kind of impacted the solutions that people need in terms of from an anti-phishing standpoint? What has been the impact of some of these changes, I guess is my question.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I'll come to that. I just want to pick up actually on a couple of things that you've just both said, though, that I think is really important. I think that thing that you've both touched on about the threat on mobile devices, particularly, and I think one of the things that we see in this very change, and we mentioned before, obviously I've done this report this year into kind of looking at the phishing landscape, but the role that I do at GigaOm here is that I work primarily in the data security space. So it's not just being anti-phishing that I've looked at this year. We've looked at things like data loss prevention, threat detection at the endpoint, a whole range of security issues. And one of the things that we see consistently in that space is the reason that the things like mobile are such a target is because what a bad actor's always looking to do is to catch the user unaware, so catch a user outside of their comfort zone. And JT, as you were just saying there, that idea that we were so used to, we would work in the enterprise inside of the secure confines of enterprise security, and most of the external comms probably was email, that when that changed and that we now find if our distributed workforce, like most of us probably working at home, it's so much easier for somebody to make a mistake in that environment because they haven't got that person to go and lean on to say, hey, I've received this eve, doesn't quite look right. What do I do about that? And actually mobile is kind of the ultimate extension of that. I've worked on incidents this year where organizations have been caught out by a phishing attack because somebody has been on a mobile device, has okayed something because they weren't really concentrating. They were at an airport, they saw the email, they dealt with the email. Suddenly they've created a security issue that's cost them a lot of money. So I just wanted to kind of call out those 2 points because I think they're hugely important.
No, that makes
JT,
sense.
Yeah, and you talked about kind of how does this change the approach? So this not only this is one specific about how we looked at the industry, but actually this was kind of our findings as we did the research. We realized that the threat landscape had changed. And to meet that new threat landscape, we realized that organizations looking to deal with anti-phishing had to think about a whole bunch of different things to what they may have done previously. So again, maybe focus perimeter security and focus on email. Well, today we need to be much more broad than that. When we look at phishing, as we look at all security, it's not just email. We have to have a look at our new SaaS collaboration tools. Maybe we've moved to Microsoft 365 and we're using Teams and we're using SharePoint Online. So we need to look at those kind of repositories and communications platforms. We need to look at the way that we share information in those. We maybe need to look at some on-premises applications that we're using, maybe our service desk tools. anywhere where we are looking to drive interaction, where somebody may look to catch us off guard and get us to overshare a piece of information or overshare some credentials or some information around our identity. We've also found that the solutions need to have depth. Just looking at the perimeter is not enough. We need to have, we need to be able to look at our services on-prem. We need to be able to look at our endpoints, and where you guys play so strong. We need to be able to look at those mobile devices. And I'll kind of come back to where I think you guys play a really important part in this story. But that idea that we've got protection from the perimeter through to the most most endpoint of endpoints, if you like. And I think what's hugely important. And again, we see this hugely over the security industry in general, is the requirement that our solutions are intelligent. The amount of threat indicators that the average security operations team or security provider is trying to deal with is vast. We're getting information from third-party threat detection tools. We're getting information from a range of detection and response tools at the endpoint across our network. We're getting masses of threat, and what's really difficult for organizations is to be able to prioritize that risk and understand what threat is most important. So we need our solutions to apply intelligence and to apply context. Some of the stuff that we looked at was really smart in terms of being able to identify when a user may have been target of a phishing attack. They've been targeted by a phishing attack, and actually what had happened was that they then could use that information to raise the risk of anything that user did in the immediate aftermath of that phishing attack. So having that kind of complex, so that intelligence and context was really important. And of course, we must any solutions that we look at, of course, must be part of a general enterprise approach as well. So they must be able to grab information from our SIEM tool, maybe be able to feed information back to it, be able to work with orchestration tools we might have. So these are all big changes in the way that we look at we look at the solution approach that we need to take. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what we mean when we talk about comprehensive coverage for anti-phishing.
No, that absolutely helps a lot. And let's, if we can, because we're going to come back to that when it comes to your side of things. Let's go to our first poll question. So, folks, for you folks that are out there, Allison's going to be putting up a poll, and the question is basically: are your employees accessing business email from personal mobile devices? So we'll wait a second and see if we can actually see the poll results as they come up. Let's see. Okay.
This is such an interesting question, because at the end of the day, as we use our mobile devices, we're always checking our email. We're using productivity apps like Office 365, and enabling these applications actually can leave businesses vulnerable to sensitive business systems, because you're talking day in, day out through either, like Paul said, through Teams, or you're emailing reports back and forth. There's just so much information that's just sent through these mobile devices. It's really interesting.
No, I completely agree. Well, it appears we're having trouble with the polling, so we're going to skip. Now, I will tell you, I was doing a speaking opportunity yesterday, and it was a packed house of security professionals, and I asked this question, and every hand in the room went up. So it literally everybody's accessing email from their phones and other personal device or other corporate device. As a matter of fact, our same global mobile threat report, on average, there's probably about 10 productivity apps on a typical device accessing mobile device accessing corporate data. So moving from there, Monique, can you step us through some of the thoughts in terms of specifically around this one part of mobile phishing, and then we're going to broaden it back up to the report and the vendors from Paul's standpoint. But since we're in this whole conversation we've just been doing, can you just step us through some thoughts about mobile phishing, and then a couple examples that people probably have seen and why one was different than the other?
Absolutely. When it comes to mobile phishing, it's still the top threat we're seeing from our mobile data. This year, we released our 2022 Global Mobile Threat Report, where we anonymized threat data we found in the wild.
from a global perspective and on a global scale, 12% of mobile users actually encountered a phishing threat. And that's just exponential when you think about this from a global scale. Based on our report as well, based on different regions, this data just, it was pretty dynamic. It changed with different, with different countries. But rightfully so, we rely on these devices day in, day out. Like I said, we leverage these productivity tools and these productivity applications on device, and especially in a BYOD environment where at the end of the day, the users are the admins. We're more connected than ever, where employees are reusing credentials across the board, and security training can only take you so far in that case. Just one attack can cause significant ripple effects throughout the entire organization, because at the end of the day, these bad actors are looking to gain access to one thing, either credentials or to leverage your mobile device to access sensitive business systems. And that's where these mobile applications come into play. Some of them are downloaded from third-party applications. Some of them, may already have malware baked into the technology. And that's where you really need to have an on-device solution that can detect these, that can analyze and vet these applications before, they cause a lot of harm. And as we yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, Monique, and one of the things I think is interesting, I'm sorry I didn't interrupt you, but one of the things that's interesting, and Paul, we didn't talk about this, but as Monique goes through this, one of the other big differences from the mobile side, for instance, when Monique was talking about 12%, that 12% of the folks that's actually 12% of the folks actually went to a malicious website as a result of phishing. So the number of people that were phished was significantly higher, but because of technology like ours, where we warn the user, hey, bad idea, don't go there, 12% of the people were dumb enough to keep going, or maybe naive enough to keep going, if I'm going to be polite, right? But so it's like, why is that number different from the higher? Well, one of the biggest considerations, again, as a part of this changing landscape and working on personal devices like what Monique's talking about, is privacy, right? If I'm sitting on a corporate laptop, sitting inside of a perimeter, looking at corporate email, I don't have a right to privacy in that email. If I'm on my own personal mobile device, and so solutions that are designed properly, like we believe ours have, on the mobile side, are ones that basically say, hey, we're going to protect your privacy. At the same time, we're going to be warning you about that. So Monica, just as you were talking about that coming in and saying privacy is something else is part of this, right?
Absolutely. And that's a big discussion among end users, is privacy. At the end of the day, when it comes to using these smaller devices, these mobile devices, in fact, the screens are smaller, like we had discussed. 66% of smartphones in an enterprise are owned by employees now. So therefore, instead of IT managing these devices, it's the users who are now managing these devices. And because of this, the number of apps we use on device has significantly increased, because we have a percentage that are personal, and we have an additional percentage that are productivity apps. And at the end of the day, where are your personal applications coming from? And unlike traditional endpoints, mobile devices, the technology is different. It's a lot more difficult for a traditional endpoint detection and response tool to be able to access the kernel in a mobile device and be able to, scan or find additional threats. And, that's where you need this on-device protection, because phishing, at the end of the day, it's still a gateway to ransomware. And regardless if phishing is on a mobile device, it's even more vulnerable, especially because, EDR tools just don't have that capability.
No, it makes sense. So and now I think it's kind of interesting, and people probably heard about this. Can you kind of briefly step us through the tale of two fishes, similar but different potential end results?
Absolutely. And with the recent Twilio breach, employees had their credentials stolen through an SMS-based spear phishing attack. As we said, attackers are looking for one thing. They're looking for credentials. They're looking for something sensitive. So, that, like you said, that 12%, it really goes a long way when you're trying to spray and pray with these phishing attacks, and you just need that one person to click on that link, that one person to click on that text messaging link, just like, with these employees, the messages were sent via text message, and they were no different than what you'd see in any organization asking you to update your password. Again, that's where you need something stronger than just security training. At the end of the day, we're all human. After these employee credentials were compromised, the attacker was able to gain access to these critical systems and the data of Twilio customers.
And it all started with an SMS spear phishing attack, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and likewise with CloudFlare, right?
Absolutely. And the same thing happened to CloudFlare. The same spear phishing attack happened to their employees, but because they were able to because they had stronger security, because they were able to detect these and catch them literally like in a matter of minutes. Within 45 minutes of the attack, all the compromised employee credentials, they were reset. And these employees, they supplied these credentials to attackers. So, at the end of the day, it's really about being cognizant about the type of messages you're getting. It's educating not only your employees on what spear phishing may look like, but you still need something strong, some sort of mobile threat defense in place to catch these phishing attacks, because it's just not about managing a device. Managing a device can only take you so far. It's really about stopping the attacks before they get out of control, before they cause significant damage.
Yeah, and I think that'll be and Paul, I'd be interested in your take on this. As Monique was talking about that, and as I was listening, I was thinking about CloudFlare here, and as it pointed out, they actually, in their case, they actually had, the security keys, a separate security key. So even though the phishing attack came in and stole the credentials, because they had invested in another whole layer, they were able to stop. But what was going through my head was kind of like how there was the EPP, endpoint protection platforms, right? And then the new emerging endpoint detection and response. Why did EDR occur? Well, EDR occurred because things had gotten past EPP, right? So it's like, okay, now we need to detect and respond. This is similar concept. This is like, okay, because they didn't have something to stop the phishing attack up front, they were fortunate enough to have something in the back end. But it's like one of these things where it's that layered defense. Stopping the attack up front is probably job one, just like we've been doing in corporate email for quite some time. We need to start going that direction for things like this. What does that make sense? And does that factor in a little bit to when we get to your report?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And actually, while Monique was talking, the thing that was going through my head all of the time was just how complex the problem is. It's the, I think in both of these examples, kind of the phrase spear phishing is used, but it's that targeted attack, and these guys are, these bad actors are crafting very specific attacks, targeting, or not all the time. There is still that kind of broad spray attack is still a thing. But it's that idea that we're targeting very specifically. And I think there's I talked before about the importance of kind of doing this stuff, not just broadly, but doing it in depth, because I think it's hugely important that you have something that is that catch-all, that if everything else has failed, if everything else fails, we need something that captures the kind of impact of doing that. But yeah, it just kind of struck me, and the reason that's important is because of how complicated this thing is. We've got to bear in mind that a lot of these bad actors, are organizations, they are businesses in themselves whose business is to compromise your security. And they are set up with, they've got a HR department, they have an employee payroll, they've got a business strategy. And one of the things I talk to customers about all the time, when I take my research hat on and put my go back to work boots on, it's that idea that organizations need to be as organized as the people who are attacking their business. and often they just can't be. So, we need solutions that can capture it when people have made a mistake, or where there's just a gap in our security that we can't spot. So we do talk about that, and but I think it's a huge point, and it's well worth it's well worth highlighting here.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's perfect.
Okay. Yeah, and according to our research, mobile specific and friendly phishing websites, they account for 75% of all phishing attacks. So, that's such a huge number. And at the end of the day, what can we learn from this? Because we need to use this as a learning opportunity, not only to improve our defenses, but to help educate our employees and our end users in using these mobile devices. Because security training can only take you so far, whether they're BYOD or corporate-owned devices. We have to do something at the end of the day.
No, that is perfect. So now that we've gone through all that and we've thought about all this, Paul, why don't you, if you could, and we're a little bit behind, but not too much, can you step us through kind of the whole approach you guys did, the criteria, and just kind of, step us through the comprehensive side of the anti-phishing landscape, and then we can kind of hit on the mobile part as well.
Yeah, we'll do, JT. And I appreciate we're kind of running, because it's such a fascinating topic. I think we've kind of spoken way more than we expected to. But I'll put myself on 1.5 speed so that I can get through this a little quicker for you. So, as we discussed earlier on, I briefly, just for people who aren't aware of kind of the radar evaluations that we do and why we do them, we talked earlier on about this kind of changing landscape. We did a report in this space a couple of years ago, and our reports really exist to give enterprise buying teams a buyer's guide, if you will, to give them some advice and information on the current market and the current threat, to help them to evaluate and choose solutions that fit and meet their business challenge. So, when we do a report, we do kind of, they come in 2 parts. We create what we call a key criteria report. What that report does is it gives some scope to the problem, gives some scope to the challenge, and then within there we present some evaluation criteria that gives people an idea of the things that they should be considering in their enterprise. And then we produce our radar reports. And what those radar reports do is take leading vendors from across the industry, and depending on the report, somewhere between 7, 8 through to maybe 15 vendors that we will look at. And in that space, we will then evaluate those vendors against our criteria, give them scoring, and then we will position them in our radar. And just to kind of mention on this one that a lot of our radars, when we do an update, they are relatively incremental, but actually when we did this one, this was quite a fundamental shift, and that did impact some of the vendors who'd appeared in the 2020 report and appeared in the 2022 report. Did it impact them slightly in ways that would be more than they would be impacted normally? But this was because we moved this idea from phishing being an email perimeter thing to this kind of comprehensive stuff that we've talked about. So what does that mean though? So when we talk about evaluation and we talk about kind of criteria and evaluating vendors, what do we mean? So you can see on this graphic, so in our radar report, we have this kind of key criteria graphic. You can see along the top that we have criteria that we measure our vendors against, and then down the left hand side you can see the vendors that we measured, and you can see each of those vendors gets a 1, 2, 3 score. Within that score, a 2 is kind of the standard. It's the thing that we expect. These are the vendors who've got they've got a very capable solution. They deliver well. They execute that part of their solution well. Some people have got sometimes vendors may get a 3, which means that they are doing above and beyond perhaps what some of the competition are doing in that market. And when they get a 1, it doesn't mean that they don't have that capability, but it does mean that they perhaps have a little bit of work on that capability, or it's not a great focus as part of their solution. You'll notice actually Zimperium score at the bottom of the table there. It's alphabetical order, no other reason. But you'll notice that you guys were capable in at least all of our criteria. One of the things that we don't do with that criteria is that we don't prioritize a criteria in the report. What we do is we lay out the criteria that we would evaluate with. And the reason we don't prioritize it is because every enterprise is different. So, for some enterprises, orchestration may be the priority criteria that they've got for evaluation, whereas for another it may be analytics. So we don't judge that, but we give you some range of criteria, and all we would say is that the things that are the highest priority, then you may wish to focus on the vendors who score the best in your highest priority criteria. And if you think back to what we was talking about before, when we talked about comprehensive approach, the criteria that we lay out here kind of fits in with that. We talked about, for example, intelligence and context. So, the criteria that might fit that would be things like analytics, ability to integrate with detection and response systems. They would be part of the way that we applied intelligence and context. The way we apply breadth and broad, and deep coverage. Well, we've got a criteria there: breadth of communication channel coverage and end-to-end support. So all of these things kind of tie back to the way that we see the market right now, the things that we think that the leading vendors should be providing, and then we turn those into criteria which we can then measure. And ultimately this range of criteria gives us this kind of comprehensive insight as we see it to the industry. But we're also aware that businesses don't just make purchasing decisions based on technology alone. Businesses also have business dynamics, business goals that they want to meet. So, for example, a business may look at the solution they buy, needs to improve their manageability and ease of use of their platform. It needs to integrate easily with solutions they've currently got. It needs to have a good total life cycle cost when they look to analyze those things. And to give you an example, so that these kind of metrics are, we always use the example of if somebody's buying a car. If you're evaluating a car, one of the things you might evaluate, one of the things you might want from your brand new car is you want good safety. You want it to be a safe vehicle for you and your family to travel in. So safety would be an evaluation metric, and the things that feed those evaluation metrics are the technology elements that the vendors then provide. So if we want safety, well, then we're going to look at the technology companies who get sort of the car companies that give us the most safety. Well, they're going to be the ones that have got the best brakes, the best seat belts, the best airbags, the best general security around. So that's kind of how this works, and that's what we've got here. Hopefully those metrics kind of explain themselves, are relatively self-explanatory, and you'll see actually that all of the vendors that we looked at least gave a capable solution. We're helping businesses address those evaluation metrics in a capable manner, and in some cases, again, we look at your guys, manageability and ease of use. You are exceptional in the way that you do that, with a good good administration platform, easy to use, very unobtrusive in terms of user experience. Well, then, from an overall metric for a business, is this easy to manage, and are we getting user pushback? Well, actually easy to manage, and users don't really know you guys are in there operating and kind of protecting their activities.
Right.
So I know we were I think we were going to throw in a poll question there, but I think for time we're going to skip over that. JT, is that right?
Yes, correct. So why don't we bring it here, because this will be a great place as it all kind of shuffles up. And I was even looking at the and you and I've discussed this along with Monique, the fact that when you went to the comprehensive piece, that shifted things around. Yeah. And so even if you looked at, for instance, some of our scores, some of the places where we weren't 3 stars or 3 pluses, a large part of those had to do with the fact that we're not an anti-phishing solution. That's not the way we're marketed. We happen to solve a specific problem, that being mobile phishing. And so the scores make sense. And so I think, the feature play, platform play, if you could explain the radar now and maybe just highlight a couple of things that are of interest to you on this chart. Yeah.
So, and you're absolutely right, and I think when you look at our radars, at the base level, nearer the center is better. That's kind of the base level of this. However, nearer the center doesn't necessarily mean solves your specific business problem. Just kind of to your point, JT, about, sometimes when we look at this, because we're looking at this kind of broad coverage element, that actually the guys that sit at the center of this, Proofpoint, Microsoft, Mimecast, these guys have got relatively broad coverage when it comes to anti-phishing. Mm-hmm. But if you're not looking for broad coverage, then those platforms aren't necessarily the answer. But in general, the nearer these guys are to the center, then the better their execution and the more broad their capability. But you can see it's kind of split into four. So we've got maturity and innovation top bottom, we've got platform and feature play left and right. And what we did see in this industry, and I think it's an interesting part of the breadth of change that we're seeing when it comes to all kinds of security, not just phishing, but phishing particularly in this case, that we're seeing the rapid innovation of the bad guys, if you like. They are rapidly innovating this space themselves. So the reason, so what was a real positive from this was the amount of innovation that we see in this space. But what I do want to call out as well is, this idea that those vendors who are mature, that doesn't make them better or worse than those who are innovating. It's just a different level of focus. So, if I look at you guys, for example, you've got a very robust, very well established piece of technology. Your focus is not, we need to do tons of innovation with that. Your focus is, we need to make that the best version of that it can be. And we're going to evolve that over time. Of course, that includes innovation, but it kind of not we didn't see that as your key focus area. It was delivering the very best solution that you've got and evolving that to meet new threats, as opposed to throwing loads of new things at it. But neither are good or bad, and depending on the enterprise, depending on the problem, that will depend on how attractive mature versus innovative may look. And also in that kind of feature platform piece, absolutely right in the way you kind of couch that, JT. If you're somebody like Proofpoint, you've got broad coverage across lots and lots of areas. You're looking at phishing in multiple locations. You're building lots and lots of context. But actually, both of the organizations who sat on the left on that feature side, both did actually something quite similar. In Zimperium's case, was Komodo. They're focused very much on the laptop, the endpoint, the Windows, the Linux, the Mac desk endpoint. And for you guys, focus very much on that mobile piece. It's a very much I know you guys will say niche, but I'm English, so it's a niche. We are, but you guys are focused on very much a, niche sometimes sounds like the wrong way to approach it, but actually it's in this space particularly. We find that really important, because what you guys do is that you are the ones who are fixing the gaps that actually the broad platform players have. And you can pick on a bunch of those platform players who aren't doing the kind of work that you might need them to do in mobile, particularly when we talked about that idea of something that captures everything at the end. So, and just to kind of wrap up, in terms of where the vendors sit, there's three circles in there. Actually, all of the vendors we looked at were either leaders or challengers, and you'll see next to every vendor name there was an arrow. And what that arrow signifies is the tail end of that arrow is where we see the vendor now. The point of that arrow is where we see the vendor in kind of the short term. And you'll notice that most of our vendors are moving there relatively rapidly. We did have a couple of kind of what we term outperformers, but mainly they are outperformers because they are attacking a very specific new point of something. So they are innovating their technology that little bit quicker. Because they have to kind of meet needs. So, again, not necessarily good, bad. This is all about identifying what you need and then finding the vendors who fit that. I don't know if we've got time, JT. I mean, I've got a little slide that can summarize this with a couple of key points. If we've got time to cover that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so that radar positioning kind of gave us that was our evaluation of the market. So I just wanted to kind of share with the audience and yourselves some of the key findings that we got from that report. I think the key thing, and we've talked about this multiple times already, that changing threat landscape requires a much broader approach. It can no longer be perimeter and email. It has to be broad, and it needs to be end to end. I think, and I include you guys in this. I think the high amounts of innovation that we're seeing that are evolving, in a response to the evolution of that threat. I think, if you're sat on this call with us and you're representing an enterprise and you're worried about the phishing threat, then actually the speed of innovation that you're seeing across all of the vendors that we looked at is really, really positive and very promising. It means, these guys are going to kind of find an answer to your problem. All of the vendors that we talked to met the criteria. And actually, my ultimate criteria for did we include a vendor in looking at comprehensive phishing? Because actually, JT, you made a really good point about Zimperium are not a comprehensive anti-phishing solution. That's not what you're trying to be. That's not how you market yourselves. It's not the job you're trying to do. And we talked about this actually before we did the report, didn't we? That because you raised that question. And my ultimate question was, do you guys stop the threat that phishing causes? And at that mobile endpoint, when all else has failed, Zimperium step up and go, we solve that. Don't you worry. We'll stop this thing spreading beyond this mobile device. We'll stop this thing laterally moving across your organization. We will stop it and we will encase it right here at the point of activation. And I think that's hugely important, because people, when I'm talking to a CTO or a CISO, their question isn't about, well, can you explain the nuance of how you achieve that? They're just saying, do you stop bad stuff happening in my organization? And one thing that we've not really touched on, and maybe it's an interesting point to wrap up on, is that managed services are a key development that we're seeing, and not just in this space, but across the industry in general. Whether that's a vendor offering a managed version of what they do, or whether that's a vendor enabling their security partners to deliver a platform on their behalf. We're seeing that across security in general. The threat's too complicated, the threat evolves too quickly, it's too broad, and many organizations lack the kind of skill and resource to deliver the to necessarily meet that challenge. So we see managed services as a key development. So they were the kind of key things that we found from it. That was the they were, and that was the background to how we put the report together, and some of the context in which we built that report. So I hope that's been useful to you both and to the audience today.
Very, very much so. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And folks, in the interest of time, we're going to wrap this up because we're right at the 45-minute mark here. Our goal with this whole thing, like we mentioned at the beginning, is to help educate, bring a perspective of what's happening. And hopefully throughout this session, you've gotten a good feel for this. You've probably already had a good feel for the fact that you were getting phished on mobile, because everybody is a package apparently from DHL or somebody waiting for them right now. So make sure you click on that link. That'd be really smart. Or scan that QR code that you have no idea where it came from. That's another thing I love to do. Recommend highly. Kidding. But so we understand there's that side. Paul's working on it right now. The report is there. Great report from GigaOm, and Paul, thank you again for including us in it. I frankly, really sincerely, because it added a lot of value to the report, just like it did with the Komodo stuff, to say, hey, look, we could only include the guys that meet every single criteria of a comprehensive platform. But the fact is, like in our case, none of them do what we do. And so, looking at this side, we're like, we're not competitive with Proofpoint at all. Matter of fact, to your point about integrating data, if we find things, we can actually notify it. And now that it makes the email side even that much better. So our goal here was not to shove our product down somebody's throat. Our goal was to talk about the problem and then talk about Paul's insights in terms of how to go about solving it. So here's some resources for you. The report itself, as we talked about, we've got a phishing page. We can do device risk assessments. We do have the global mobile threat report. And unfortunately, because we ran out of time, Monique was also going to show, we have a tool that actually enables us to show the business value of our solution. And it actually takes the threat vectors that are on mobile, device compromises, malicious networks, mobile phishing, mobile malware. What percentage of the devices actually get impacted by that? What percentage of those that are infected actually end up leading to a compromised credential, which of course is the goal of phishing? And what does that value bring back to the organization? That's also something we can do. So if anybody's interested in that, hit our contact us form on our website. We'd be happy to do that. So wrapping up, any last comments or thoughts, Monique?
I think, at the end of the day, just be aware of what you're clicking on, and, just have a solution in place that can protect these on device.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think for me, just appreciate that the problem is complex. Don't feel that you're stupid if you don't think you've got this nailed down. Very few organizations have this nailed down, if any. Realize it's complex, but realize you need to look at it broadly, and you need to look at it in depth, and you need to look at it on mobile, because that's a huge risk.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. Great session. We could have obviously gone on a lot longer. Everybody have yourself a fantastic day, and please let us know if we can help you.